This video contains gratuitous use of profanity and uncomfortable pauses to compensate for lack of professionalism and original thought. Viewer discretion advised.
This week, we're joined by the master of the Zone Collectibles universe, Kevin Clady.
Coming to you live from Jabba's throne room, where unlike HasLabs, Boba Fett does have a Rancor. We bring to you the Nerdy Manroom with your host, Hassel and Monster. And this week, we have a special guest, the man, the myth, the legend, the fountain of knowledge, the tower of power too sweet to be sour, the fearless leader of the Zone Collectibles, Kevin Clady.
How y'all doing? And
Awesome.
and I love that introduction, but let's face it, I'm just a surrogate for the real Tower of Power, and that's the boss lady. So I'm here humbly serving.
You're here on behalf of her.
There you go.
We all know that feeling. We all answer to a higher authority. I can tell you in my house, it is not me.
Yeah, but it's a little different when your higher authority is here, there. No matter where you go throughout the day.
Oh.
It's a whole nother. You can't call out. You can't
start saying,
boss lady.
when did you gain omniscience? You're everywhere.
Yeah, and along with this, we should mention too that Kevin and the fine folks at Zone Collectibles, that they sponsor the show, they help us out, they put the word out there for us, and Kevin, I'll let you actually plug the show or your store and all the different ways they can get to you. Unlike us, since you know it better than we do, and then also I wanted to ask you if you wouldn't mind taking a minute and explaining the your new motto for this year, which is and I'm probably going to butcher this because every time I try to say it, I get tongue twisted, but bringing unity through community, and hopefully I got it out right this time.
There you go, Monster.
Well, I tell you, it's an awesome job. Last year, well, first of all, I'm Kevin. I'm the resident RNGM at the Zone. No fancy titles, just RM stands for Register Monkey, and GM stands for Game Master. So I'm about as OG as it gets. We're in Tifton, right here on Main Street, 305, in the historic downtown. We're a shop kind of like, if you've not been in the Zone and experienced, we've got 70,000 items from the front door to the back curtain, plus another 1,000 square foot behind the curtain. We've got a little bit of everything and something for everybody. So we kind of consider the Zone an oasis. Last year, I used to do my Facebook Lives, and it was bringing fun to 2021 in community. And because Lord knows I wasn't going to go through another 2020 again, that just was not happening. So this year I got thinking about it with possible shutdowns and lockdowns. We're bringing unity through community. There are a ton of fandoms and people who don't get a chance to interact with one another. We're taking all different kinds of folks who may not even know they have something in common, and we're just making it happen. So fandoms unite. That's pretty much what we're about this year.
You guys do a really great job there, because it's a pretty well blended area when you get in there and you look around, and there's something for everyone, no matter where you look when you go into the store.
Amen. And that's something that we work really hard at, is the diversity and the variation on products that we carry. It's not like a big box. It's not like your GameStop. It's not like other quote unquote comic stores who want to be somebody else. We practice on being the best us we can be, and rather than being a poor imitation of somebody else.
It's better to be that fruitcake than a cookie cutter store.
Hey, amen.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I haven't been able to come home down that way since 2018, I believe was the last time I got to come to the area. Traveling for work in 2019, I was gone 3 weeks out of a month every month, and then so I spent 1 week at home every month trying to get ready to move at the end of the year. And then, the last 2 years, I've just, other than travel for work, it's been like, all right, I can't really leave the house because trying to avoid, not necessarily certain people, but I'm trying to avoid people in general so I don't get sick again. Because I did get the Rona back in December of 2020, and it was a little rough. So I'm trying to avoid that.
Yeah, when I get mugged in Walmart by your mother telling me that I've got to speed my wedding process up so that you come home, I'm just saying maybe it's time for a visit, dude.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get down there sometime this year, hopefully.
And you don't want to play rock, paper, scissors, shotgun. That's a whole nother game you don't want to play.
No, sir.
No. No, but we wanted to thank you, Kev, for joining us this week, and you always do a fantastic job of sponsoring us and help us out with stuff. But this week, after we get through the news, we're going to get into some comic book knowledge of what ifs and certain things. And you are a much probably deeper value of knowledge than either myself or Hassel here on some of that. So we wanted to make sure we had somebody who could give us even more perspective. Like I was telling Hassel before we even started recording, I remember very short snippets of very certain what if comics or elseworlds comics, and after that, my knowledge is like, all right, I know it existed, but I am not an expert by any means.
Amen. That's, those were the seeds were laid down for pretty much everybody's multiverse when they decided to do those. And most of, I don't want to say all, but a lot of those stories have come to fruition in one way or another, which is really cool to see.
Yeah. Yeah, so before we get into that, we'll jump into the news. And Kevin, anytime in there in the news, if you want to jump in and add anything to what we're doing, feel free to throw it in there. But we'll kick off with some sports news. And this week we had some unfortunate news from WWE Hall of Famer Sonny Tammy Lynn Sitch got arrested in New Jersey on January 13th. Looks like it's 3 possible charges collectively. Making terroristic threats, illegally possessing a weapon. Unfortunately for her, this is not her first run-in with the with law lately. She's had a lot of problems since 2018. An 8-month jail sentence for DUI-related instances. I think first half of 2021, she spent in jail for violating restraining orders and suspended licenses and eluding an officer. And unfortunately, the only update I saw on this after first hearing about this was that when she was publicly asked, what happened, her actual quote was, "I've got a lot of shit going on." So,
yeah, she's a basket case, and allegedly it was a Sid Vicious special that she threatened the person with a pair of scissors.
Yeah, and I don't think I mentioned that, but it was not a firearm. That was confirmed. So yeah. I'm assuming that, like I said, the weapon had to be bladed or a blunt object. But
it was said to be a pair of scissors on a various site I was looking at, and I should have documented it. But yeah.
And the worst part about this is, if she would have come from Hollywood's Hall of Fame instead of the WWF, and if she would have been part of that crowd, it would have been probation and community service.
Yeah,
just saying.
Yeah, and that's honestly true. And I've seen that a lot of people have tried to, help her over the last couple of years and reach out to her. Hopefully, she gets some help she needs. But like I said, I know she's been having a tough time. I think she was inducted in the Hall of Fame in 2011, and I think she has since 2018 sold her Hall of Fame ring and everything else. So,
she's done.
She's been on some pretty hard times.
Soon to be seen on right?
Yeah, most likely if it hasn't already. Hassel, I didn't know did you have any other sports news? I know the playoffs started, and I'll be honest with you, I did not watch the wild card last night or any of it over the weekend, so I'm not sure who's even standing. Still standing.
We watched a little here and there. Officials were not friends to the competitors this week during the what was the game Saturday? Wow, I forget who it is. It escapes me now, but apparently it was a Cincinnati game. Actually, there was an erroneous whistle blow right at the end of the game that pretty well set things off into motion to where if that hadn't happened, opposing team had a chance to come back and beat Cincinnati, and they didn't. Then during the Dallas game, they were trying to hurry up, do a no huddle, and they didn't realize the officials has to touch the ball. So Dax Prescott, he's trying to hurry up and, him in the center just start like you do a yard ball. And because of the fact that they allowed the official to touch the ball, it was a dead play. Clock runs out. And then Buffalo just smashed. They murdered the Patriots. They got some revenge for the Falcons. We'll take it. And it's set up to be a pretty good as long as Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady lose or don't go or break a collarbone, I'm fine. I'm kind of low key pulling for the Bills. That's they're the dark horse I'm wanting to win.
So before we move ahead, because we won't spend too much time on it, but is Cincinnati still in the running, or were they kicked out over the weekend?
No, they won. They won.
Okay.
They said, but it was documented within 3 hours of the game that officiating crew will not officiate another game in the playoffs or the Super Bowl.
The reason I ask is it kind of ruins some of my argument at work because I am in the Ohio area. So when I go to some of the sites here and I'm like, especially now we've had a lot more people absent and stuff. And a lot of us do the illness, but when they're absent just because they chose not to come to work, I'm like, it's the weekend. Why didn't you come to work? I mean, you're in Ohio. You've got Cincinnati and Cleveland to watch. What are you going to get out of it? So just come on to work. Just set the DVR, get the end of the
Cigar
story.
Joe Burrow, he's still in this thing right now. So you guys are you're in the race.
Yeah, I got to quit using that argument at work now, apparently, though. But after that, we'll jump ahead to toy news. And last week we talked about the Mezco 112 day, and I said I didn't see a lot of updates on it. I went to digging afterwards, and I did find out that the 112 day became actually it was only one single item that was released. There was no other items put out, no other announcements. I don't know how much that was affected because right before that, the Toy Fair was canceled, and maybe they were going to do some stuff beforehand, and maybe they're going to share some stuff now in a virtual con or something, which has been some of the rumor. But the only thing I saw that went up for pre-sale was their Symphony of the Night Nosferatu. It was supposed to drop at midnight on 112, and it did, but then the site crashed and was down for a couple hours. So there was a lot of issues with getting that ordered. I don't collect a lot of the Mezco stuff. I think it looks great. I'm not a 112th collector. I don't have enough space for it.
That particular one does not look good. It's their version of the Universal Monsters. It's actually Symphony of Horror.
Is that what it is?
I've seen a few of the figures on there. Yeah, you had me all excited for some Castlevania with that right here. But I looked it up today. It's they don't look good. There is a Gill Man. There's a Frankenstein, a Wolfman, and I guess Nosferatu, Dracula, however you want to say him. So they look kind of hokey to me, and that's a shame because I'm typically a good fan of theirs. I've got their Freddy and Jason, and I think I have a John Wick that's Mezco as well. So they just kind of dropped the ball with that for me.
Yeah, I was surprised there wasn't more stuff, but I just wanted to make sure we updated everyone on that just because we mentioned it last week, but I could not find the news, and apparently that's what was going on because we recorded the day after that, and unfortunately, I think they were still having issues with trying to get pre-sales. I think they're still up for pre-sale now. I'd have to check to be sure, and I'm not even sure what the price range was. I decided not to try to hit the website because every time I did it,
typically
it was down.
Stuff ranges about $88 to between $80 and $120, just depending.
But sticking on that same lines, we've got some Mego horror figures that were revealed over the week, and looks like these are coming. It says they're going to hit Walmart pretty soon. I'm assuming they're elsewhere as well, but that's the only retail store I saw. Kevin, you may know better than we do if Mego is selling those at other places as well. And I know I pronounce that wrong every time I say it.
Mego traditionally has been really strong at Target. And unfortunately, due to busting up some of their contracts with delivery dates and the inconsistency of the way the sizes variants were different from the originals, they have 3 sizes now. Target was reportedly not so happy to have an exclusive for a product that they ended up not really wanting to have an exclusive of. So
wow.
It's my understanding that they are going to be available elsewhere at a pretty rapid pace.
Awesome. Yeah, I see them occasionally, but I'll be honest with you, I see them in Meijer stores up here, which is, another department store. I know, Kev, you've been up in the Ohio area before. I'm sure you've seen them, and I mean, they're around in other areas as well. I never saw one before I moved to Ohio, to be perfectly honest, but I see them in there, and I never see them in the Target and Walmart here, to be honest.
I was only seeing them like the FYE in the mall and stuff like that, but that a lot of those places are shut down now. So,
well, and let's face it, the only reason why a lot of stuff when Target originally had it got passed on to some other folks was they had turned around and cut them loose from their distribution chain and let them go into their secondary distribution chain with their corporate partners.
Coming to a Ollie's near you soon.
Amen. I mean, unfortunately, they do some beautiful stuff, but he really kind of lost track with this resurgence by going exclusive, and then you couldn't order online. It was impossible. The website wasn't ready for it. If you got an assortment, you're trying to figure out how to get, the Kirk and the Spock and all of these things, and it was just a nightmare. So all the way around, it was pushed to market, and unfortunately, it's kind of what you get when you pick speed over a guaranteed nice slow path of growth.
And it looks like these figures, like I said, I saw these were going to Walmart maybe sooner than others, but probably others as well. But it's a 2-pack of Child's Play Chucky and Tiffany, and then there's a 2-pack of Mel Brooks's Young Frankenstein with Young Frankenstein and his monster in it.
That's an odd pairing.
Well, and you guys
I get the Child's Play because Chucky has his own series now, and it actually is a pretty good series. So I can get them trying to ride the wave of that right there. But Young Frankenstein, I mean, that's a property that's, I would assume, have a very small following these days.
Yeah, but you guys hadn't heard? They're looking at picking it up from a streaming service.
Really?
Yeah,
I had not heard that.
That's why they've been packaged together, because it's a streaming. They're both under the same license holders for the same streaming property.
Oh, that makes more sense now. Yeah, I was wondering why Young Frankenstein was. As much as I kind of enjoy that. I mean, it is a classic comedy, but it's a horror comedy. But at the same time, you haven't seen or heard much of it in years. And
exactly, and they're trying to decide: are they going to go with like a prequel version of what happened up into the classic movie, or a continuation after the classic movie? But that's where they're trying to figure it out right now to make it a streaming show.
Awesome. I'd actually be interested in seeing that. Yeah,
You're not the only one.
We're gonna have to keep our ear out for that one now. Some other toy news we had this week. 3-0 shared a teaser for their Ultraman 1/6 scale figures. I didn't see any further details on that yet. And Kevin, I know, again, I keep harping on you, but I know you've got a lie into a lot of this stuff. You look at it all the time. I don't know if you've seen any more about that than what I saw. I just saw the teaser, and it was like from season 2.
Other than that, strictly, again, based off of all of the streaming buzz around what's going on and rights being transferred. And right now, not only is it about the streaming revenue to get people's eyes glued on a longer basis, but it's also about taking these properties and creating an additional revenue stream.
Yeah, and I've seen, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the figure, they didn't have pictures of the figures, but they had some Ultraman pictures up, and the pictures I saw looked like there was the Netflix streaming, maybe the animated series they have on Netflix. It looked like some of the armors from that, but I wasn't sure.
And that's a way for them to kind of open up to show that the revenue stream possibility is there. Cobra Kai. When Cobra Kai has hit the last couple seasons, it's actually turned the Karate Kid merch back into a viable licensing property. So now you can get your Cobra Kai goodies that they're licensing out now. You can turn around and get your Karate Kid 1, 2, 3, and they're all separate licensing agreements. So you now are getting a better opportunity to have additional smaller toy companies being able to jump in, because they just want to get product out there, which is really kind of cool.
Yeah, I've been tempted a few times to buy and I keep telling myself no, but I've been tempted to buy the Cobra Kai Ninja Turtle packs because I keep seeing them. I'm like, I need to stay away from getting into too many more properties right now, but that one does look nice.
Oh yeah, I've seen the figures, and my son has some, and they are very, very awesome.
Some other news we had this week. Super 7 actually put out a teaser a couple of days ago for a new Ultimates Andre the Giant figure. I saw that they did a full reveal, I think either late yesterday or early today, of that same figure. So I don't have the first one, so I don't know what's different between the two, because I think they've already released one already.
The other one that came out, they had the long vest with he had the Indian fringe or whatever kind of. Now they have more of an afro in that there. But figure-wise, it looks like the exact same body, and they went with a little shorter hair, give him the yellow trunks he had in early '86, just before he turned on Hogan. Because so there's a few pictures there if you look. Early '86, him and Hogan was tagging up, and he wore yellow trunks just like Hogan wore yellow trunks. So they're getting, because they can't go with the singlet with the one strap, because Vince will sue the hell out of them. So they're skating that line to where they can still get by, because he did wear that, at various points in his career. But that was probably the most prominent. He wore the just basic trunk.
Gotcha.
And you got to
go ahead,
remember, and sorry, but and you got to remember that Super 7 is now taking the playbook from Funko. They are now going to the estates and getting the rights to do things, circumventing the organizations that these people were part of.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
and I'm sure his daughter's
heard
probably
that.
sold whatever she can sell. I mean, he has a Legends deal, or she has a Legends deal for him through, Mattel and WWF for video games and likeness and whatnot. But the likeness they typically go off of is your WrestleMania 3, that era. So this is pre-Mania 3. He may have actually wore these trunks around WrestleMania 2, if I'm not mistaken, when he was in the Battle Royal.
That might be. I assume this is part of a whole new wave that they're going to announce soon, but this was the first one we saw out of it. And usually they do a couple of teasers and maybe one figure, and then they start releasing the whole wave as far as, hey, this is going to be the next pre-order. So I'm sure there'll be more to come on that soon.
That's all I care about. I just want them to do a great Muta at some point.
So that's your breaking point, huh? It'll give you a great Muta, and you're gonna order it.
$60 will be spent that day.
Yeah, well, make sure you clear it first, because the last time you announced stuff you bought on here, you got in trouble afterwards because you didn't tell somebody else first.
I think she watches the show now just to see if I've admitted to buying anything else.
So now the meme's going to be, take my money with her permission. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. We can move over to Transformers properties. We had a few things come up for them. There's Furai, and I probably butcher this every time I say it, but Furai model kit of Leo Prime is up for pre-order. The news I saw said it was going to be a $75 price tag, but there's an early bird price of $67.50 while supplies last. But when I looked it up on most of the retailers I order from, I saw the 75 everywhere. So I'm not sure if that was already over or if that was just a specific directly from them or something. But
yeah, it was specific with partnership.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. I usually check a few stores like Josie store and Big Bad Toy Store stuff, and everywhere else it was like 75. So I assumed that maybe I just missed it somewhere. But
no, they were still getting 75. It just ended up being a kickback where they got a little bit lower buy-in price for wholesale to be able to give the discount. So,
gotcha. Yeah, and I don't have a special connection necessarily to the Beast Wars type stuff, so I probably won't go in for it, but it did look really nice, and I do have an Optimus Prime of those model kits, and they're nice, and they're not terrible to put together. It's just one of those that I didn't have a special connection to, so I probably won't go for it. But from what I saw, I think it's coming out in August of 2022. Well, if everything holds up. I mean, we say a lot of stuff comes out of it right now, but we never know when it's actually going to show up.
It's always quotation marks.
Yeah. Some other reveals I saw today, and I think a lot of these were like late last night and early today, but some Fan Toys prototype reveals. I didn't see any pre-order updates as far as when these are going up for update or anything, but there was a FT56 Variator and FT58 Diverge, which are their takes on Gears and Swerve, some of the mini bots. I actually had the Bad Q versions, and these actually look a lot better, but for the price difference for what Fans Toys usually goes in for, I probably won't be swapping over. But they showed these, and then they showed their final two pieces of their Superion Combiner. And when I was looking, the last time they made a piece of that combiner was 2019. I didn't see one released in 2020 or 2021. Yeah, they've got three pieces out. These are the last two, which are the characters are Firefly and Slingshot, and they're called FT30D Viper and FT30E Jester. Kind of surprised it took them this long to get the last ones, unless it was just something, COVID related, or if it was an amiss, because, a lot of people said maybe the folks that I've watched or talked to that have these have said, hey, they're great in their singular mode, but they weren't feeling real sturdy for the combiner mode, and maybe they were going back and fixing some things for that. I'm not sure, but I mean, from what I saw of them, they look great, but there's no word on when they're actually be out for sale yet.
Your Mom Ra this never showed.
Well, at least I don't need other pieces for him, right?
You do not.
With that, we can go to another Hasbro property. We got some Star Wars. And Kevin, you brought up Funko Pops earlier. I had not seen last year's. I didn't know they actually did some 2021 Valentine's Day Pops, but they've got some 2022 ones as well. Looks like this year, and they're all decoed in pink for Valentine's Day, but there's a Luke Skywalker with Grogu. They've got like heart-shaped cutouts, where he's holding them and stuff, and they're doing some decorations. There's a Mandalorian with a Valentine's Day card for Grogu. There's Grogu who's eating a heart-shaped cookie instead of the normal little blue cookie he ate on the show. and Ahsoka Tano with a box of holiday chocolates. Same price they always are everywhere else, usually around $11 to $12 range. It's like they're up for pre-order from Entertainment Earth, which is funny because I saw that, but then another article said they were going to be Target exclusives. I guess last year's was. I didn't even realize they made them last year. I ran across one this weekend in a video game store.
Yeah, they actually do sneak in a bunch of holiday stuff, but it's usually down on the QT because it's not a real big seller for them, because it doesn't go with their, they like to go with the tried and true for the collector, for the version of the character that they really love. So it's a revenue stream, but it's not something that brings them in a lot. They just do it because, TY did it. They did Valentine's, they did Easter, they did Christmas. So Funko does the same thing. And quite frankly, the 2021 holiday for Marvel, the gingerbread men, that didn't have it for me.
I mean, you don't want a VD Day Grogu?
I think the Funko Pops look really neat all the time, but it's one of those things where I didn't buy them at first. I was like, they're not going to last. And then they're everywhere. And I'm like, even if I went back now and just got ones I really like, I'd be searching forever as many as they've made. So I own one that somebody gave me for Christmas of a Green Ranger. And I'm like, I'd like to go get the rest of them, but I'm not hunting that stuff down at this point. There's way too many. I have a
fair amount of them, and it's surprising at what they go for. Because I didn't know they made Sanford and Son ones. I was literally just goofing around on Amazon one day, and they showed Fred Sanford, and he's doing I was like, holy shit, I need this. And it had a $95 price tag on it because it was aftermarket through Amazon. And so I go to eBay. I said, surely not more than $30-40. I was wrong. It went upwards to $120.
Yeah.
So I do not have my coming to see you, Elizabeth Fred Sanford. But I have a good many Funko Pops, ranging from comics to wrestling to I got John Wick, Julio Jones. Yeah, I got my Coming to America Pops, which I'm quite proud of. I don't have the elusive Mr. Randy Watson, but I will have Sexual Chocolate one day.
Hey, there you go.
I look at them like I do everything else with collecting. If I start buying those, I am sure they are far more addicting than I want to admit. And, I don't have any other vices if I start buying those, I'm not going to be able to stop. So I got to avoid them at all.
And they're so readily available. You can find them everywhere. You go to GameStop, you find them. You go to a comic shop, you buy them. They're at Walmart. You go to the, electronic section of Walmart, massive section, which is surprising.
And now the sports stuff is at Foot Locker and, a bunch of other places. I can tell you, I've never bought a Funko Pop for me. I've always been given mine holidays and gifts, and people know what I'm into and whatever. And I've got 45 of them, and I've never bought one.
But you have quite the variety there at your shop, because I know I'm. Oh, every time I go in there, I'm amazed. I just sit there, and you guys, have the little sleeves over them to protect their casings and whatnot, and it's. If you can't find what you're looking for in there, with the exception of it being a, something that's, like I said, the Fred Sanford, or something that's sold a year or two back and out of range, you can't find it. I mean, you have a massive station. This hats off to you.
Do appreciate the kind words. We try real hard, but yeah, they're like Pringles. Once you get started, you can't have just one.
Yeah, and I mentioned I saw the last year's Valentine's Day ones in a video game store this weekend. I was in there with my son. He wanted to buy some new Skylanders because he still plays that game and maxes them all out. And he has almost all of them, so he's just in there looking to see if he can find any. This gentleman comes in. The reason I saw this figure is because he comes in with 6 those the tubs you get from Walmart, those old gray ones or blue ones or whatever. He comes in with 6 of those, slap full of them. It's like, wife said I gotta clear out the room for the kid to come, so I had to get all these out there. He had 6 tubs full, and they were going through them. I was like, oh my god, this has got to be extremely addicting. I'm glad I don't buy any.
And they actually hold their value loose, which is crazy.
They go for a ton. But with that,
Now, when you were mentioning your son and Skylanders, you got to let me know, because I probably have 150 loose ones here in the store, not to mention one still in the package. So we've got a whole 2 shelves in the department dedicated to it. And we've got the mega blocks where you can do Skylanders as like Legos and build all that kind of fun stuff. So
I will
We'll hook
find
up
out
later.
because he's got a checklist somewhere of all the ones he has and doesn't have, and I'm surprised because he had all those games as a kid. He's 14 now, but he's like, yeah, he still turns them on once a week and maxes out some character, and I'm like, you beat every one of these games. Why are you still playing? It's like, I don't know, but he
Why
loves it.
not?
Yeah, pretty much that's what it became. But moving ahead, we got some Marvel Legends, and these are all rumors at this point. They're all I don't have any official confirmation of them, so you can take them with a grain of salt. Kevin may have the inside line and know if any of these are true, but I haven't seen any pictures or rumored dates yet. But we've got a Spider-Man 60th anniversary set of items coming out. Looks like a bunch of 2-packs. First up, Null and Venom. And this may be the Null. We did see a Null a few months ago from them on one of their Fan First Fridays. So this is, I'm assuming, the Null from that. But it says it's in a 2-pack with a Venom figure. There's a Spider-Verse Penny and Spider. I don't know how they pronounce it. I've seen it 100 times in Spider-Verse comics, so I'm not sure how you're actually supposed to pronounce it. It's SPDR. I'm assuming Spitter. There's a Homecoming movie deco Ned and Peter Parker pack, and then Spinneret and Spider-Man 2-pack. And then we've got some single pack listings that were posted. They're a Toei Japanese Spider-Man. I saw that one might possibly be deluxe with the robot he had, which, if I'm not mistaken, was it Leopardon, or again, I'm terrible with names, but
I remember I have to get out there. That's just for the craziness of it. Talk about what ifs. That's definitely
well. The only thing that would have made No Way Home better is if you'd have got him and the Spider-Man from the 70s in there somewhere as a cameo. There's supposed to also be an Amazing Fantasy number 15 Spider-Man. And then the last 3, I think, were on retro cards, supposedly. And it's a Walmart exclusive Lizard. 90s animated Spider-Man, which I'm pretty sure we've already had that on a retro card. So is that just a re-release of the same one? And then a comic accurate version of Iron Spider-Man, which I'm heard that it might be on the retro card as well. Again, these are all rumors.
Well, have you guys seen the rock and roll ones with the Funkos in front of the album replicas?
No.
Yeah, I've seen Guns N' Roses. They got various ones I've seen of those. And I think I've seen some Kiss.
Well, they are soliciting for the same version for comic books. So you're going to have Superman Funko Pop lifting a car, and with behind him is Action Comics #1. So I can definitely believe the Amazing Fantasy 15 because they're reenacting the cover with the pop, and the replica of the issue is going to be in the back, just like in the albums for the rock and roll.
Okay. Well, that makes sense.
Well, that would probably be cooler than the figure, because every time they've tried to do an Amazing Fantasy 15 Spider-Man, it comes out like the drizzling shits.
Exactly.
It typically looks real bad.
Yeah.
Exactly. But they've managed to have a hit with all this rock and roll stuff. Also, supposedly in 2022, they're going to be doing country pops for the country albums, and one of them that they're doing is a Dolly Parton pop.
I am sure there are plenty of music collectors who will go in for those very quickly.
If they get a King George, I'd probably have to reach out for it.
Some other Marvel Legends updates we've got. There's supposedly going to be some Black Panther wave reissues. I'm assuming before the new movie. A Black Panther, Killmonger, Nakia, and Shuri were listed in that. I'm sure there's some slight mold redecos and stuff to them, but nothing major. And then there's going to be some. Of course, there'll be a Wakanda Forever set, and we've got a couple of code names because they're all in code names right now. I'm sure to keep away from spoilers and stuff. But we've got a Good Night 6 and a Sleep Tight 7, which are listed as a comic Black Panther and comic Hathor Zarazi figures. And there's nothing else from that wave mentioned right now. I'm sure they're trying to keep it as under wraps as they can. Now, again, Marvel Legends team is not the best at keeping that stuff under wraps. They want to announce it one day and hours before it comes out.
As Hasbro and Mattel let the cat out of the bag on various movies.
They're not great on some of that, to be honest.
They're reading it right up there with Lego.
Yeah.
Lego usually jumps the gun on all of them.
They do. They do.
See, I go in the store and specifically go look at the Lego packs just to see if there's something in there before I can figure out. I did see a Marvel Select figure go up for sale, actually. And what I saw was it says for sale at Shop Disney UK right now, but supposed to be in the US soon. It's a 7-inch Hawkeye, comic accurate Hawkeye with Lucky the Pizza Dog. Not necessarily my Hawkeye. I'm not a fan of the t-shirt wearing, sunglass wearing version of him, which is what it looked like from what I saw. But if they made I would go in for it if they made a classic uniform of him or an updated Marvel Legends.
I want him on the West Coast Avengers retro card. Yeah. I want it straight up OG 88 all day.
I would actually like to see that. I'd probably go in for that, and then I'd have to go back and buy all the Marvel Legends retro Avengers.
Because if they do that with a Silver Centurion, I'll rebuy the Silver Centurion as well.
Well, and then imagine a Tigra, but she's flocked too.
Hey,
you see what I'm saying?
Or the right color.
There you go.
That current one, while I think that current figure actually looks pretty good, the color is way off. Yeah, I've seen every one of them I look at, I'm like, oh, that's just way too dark.
They did a great job on the sculpt, but their paint sometimes seems to be a little wonky.
Sometimes. So jumping over to DC while we're on comic figures, McFarlane's got a few more of his multiverse figures up for pre-order now. Looks like the Frost King Endless Winter. I can't say that apparently today either, but that's all those are up for pre-order now. Supposed to release in April. And there's a Batman, a Black Adam, Wonder Woman, and Green Lantern John Stewart. We've shown them a couple times before. The John Stewart, I think, is the only one of these that is actually not a new mold this time. The rest of them they look like they're new molds because there's a lot more gear to all of them for the Endless Winter story.
Is the snow look to them? Is that actually on the figure? Or is that promo on look only?
I think it's only promo look, unless I'm wrong. Kevin,
every picture I've seen, they've had this like snow on their legs or whatever, and
in the pictures that I've seen, the plastic is frosted. So
maybe it is.
So I've seen the mock-up in the catalogs. I do want to give everybody a warning though out there of late from a lot of us independent shops. We all know that NECA is meant to really stay in the box. If you want to try to make a NECA and actually diorama it, you need 15 to 20 minutes under a hairdryer to try not to bust off any parts. Well, we've been hearing with these last batch of McFarlane's DC multiverse, the same thing's got to be done.
Really?
A lot of arms are breaking off when you're trying to deal with Batman and the grappling gun and a bunch of other things. They're snapping for whatever reason. So, my PSA, if we accomplish nothing else but me being here, is to just, if you're gonna try to diorama these things, warm them up, either NECA or McFarlane, just to be safe.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that because I've only got a couple of McFarlane out of the box, which is honestly a Superman and a Flash, I think, and I haven't opened any of the rest of those.
It's been mostly things with accessories. While you're trying to get it just right, it's not turned out well. So do just kind of keep that and remember that whatever he's been doing, it's changed for either rapidness or ease or something. So just warm them up first. It's a good rule of thumb.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense because we were talking last week when we were recording about the speed of his stuff being able to come out, and everybody else was like, "Oh, we're gonna put this out in April," and he announces something, says, "I'm gonna put it out in April," and it starts showing up in March, and everybody else is like, "We're gonna put it out in April," and it shows up in March of next year.
Right. It seems to be they got to be cutting some corners somewhere. Maybe that's what they're doing it.
He's doing rapid prototyping, and he's doing some advanced manufacturing processes that are definitely cutting corners. Stuff's not.
I did see his Batman Year 2 is finally hitting shelves when it was supposed to hit. What, about 3-4 months ago? When they yanked it, and it's actually on shelf and pre-orders now.
So funny you mentioned that, but living here in Cincinnati, the local toy stores here, there's a lot of them because this is home of Kenner and everything else when it was around. But a couple of different stores here I've seen are already getting people reselling that Batman figure specifically, and I asked one of them because I was in the store and they had somebody come in and sell. I was like, why so? I said, you got 2 of them already. Why is somebody bringing a third? They're like, people just aren't enjoying it. Said it was a great concept and it looked great on paper. And then when they got it in hand, and I don't know if it was because I talked about I wasn't really a fan of how you got to take the arms off just to put the cape on, the flowing cape and stuff. And they're like, people just don't like it. It does not have it has the shelf presence from the look in the box, but once you take it out of the box, the presence is like gone.
Yeah, if you keep it as like a mini statue, it does look good. But that cloth cape that comes with it looks worse than those old Kenner figures that had the little cloth cape that had the little C clamp. It's worse than that.
Well, and also if you take a look at the packaging, guys, he uses a static process to keep the cape in place with the plastic. So once you take it out, the static's gone. It falls flat.
Interesting. I didn't know that either, but that's a
Were these figures loose monster, or were they in the box still?
The folks who sold them back to that store had them in the box, but they had been opened because they were marked as open on the price tag they were put on them. So I didn't see it out of the box.
I was just curious if they were getting the ones that had the autographs and taking the autographs and keeping it and selling the figure.
I didn't even look to see about that. So that's an interesting. I might have to look at that next time I'm over there, but I'm not sure. But while we're on comic news, we'll jump down, and we had a couple of new, much to my dismay, a couple of more new X-Men titles listed for April. And don't get me wrong, I love my X-Men titles, but I'm not a fan of the current runs of them, to be honest. But looks like we've got a mini series from Steve Fox and Salva Espen as X-Men 92 House of X. From what I saw on it, was like it's supposed to be what if the Krakoa age had came during the iconic 90s X-Men run. I'm not really a fan of Krakoa stuff anyway right now, so I'm not sure how much I'm going to like that. I'll probably still buy it because it's X-Men, but I wasn't really.
I don't see that working out really well with the 90s X-Men because they actually have morals still. They still fought for Xavier's dream. They hadn't give up hope, and they wasn't all these areas of gray with the exception of Wolverine.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of what they're doing right now necessarily, so I still collect it because it's X-Men and that's my bread and butter, but I'm also not a huge fan of the current stories. And then the other one I saw coming out was Knights of X by Teenie Howard and Bob Quinn, and honestly it looks like it's just the Excalibur title continuing on, and they're just changing the title from what it looked like to me. I don't know, Kevin, if you saw anything different or knew more about them than what I did. It just looked like a continuation for me on that one.
Yeah, and unfortunately with these writers and artist teams, they're changing them at the drop of a hat, and unfortunately you don't have a reliable editor who's trying to keep the ship on a course that makes sense. Yeah. So right now Marvel and DC are both doing the same thing. They're worried about 5-issue blocks to make trade paperbacks, and that's pretty much it.
And I think a new number one each 6 months to a year is going to spike sales and be a save all. It's a short term fix.
Well, we've all lived through the late 80s and early 90s, guys, and we're going to have another resurgence of that before it's all over with, because we are due for another crash because folks aren't reading comics. They're collecting art on variant covers. They're doing covers that have nothing to do with the story. And it's the same thing with the flashy covers from the 80s and the 90s, except now at the speed of the internet, the bubble's going to pop even faster and hurt a lot of people.
Yeah, I can see that coming. And honestly, you mentioned it's a rehash of the 80s and 90s and that, but the same storyline wise too. I mean, in the 90s, you saw every DC major character replaced with somebody else or change their look just to suit a new generation, and now they're doing the exact same thing again with all those. And I'm like, did I go back in time and start back over with this again?
Well, they didn't ride the wave as long as they should have with some of those characters. I mean, when you got Azrael Batman was a really cool looking character. And it's in no time, Batman's back. The reign of Superman, you could have stretched that out a little further before. Cyborg Superman was a really cool looking character. Handful of issues, Superman's back. And then when they come back, Batman stepped aside instantly to let Dick take over. And Superman comes back to this sweet ass mullet, but then he's like, let's go get married and be a middle-aged dad, and it's like.
Well, and then that's just like even with the New 52. A lot of people, I know some of you may have, bought into some of the New 52. And unfortunately, that was 2.5, 3 years of your money you ain't never going to get back. But they could have left an anthology going all this time, changing artist teams, but keeping a writing thread where technically the New 52, even after Convergence, you could still do stories between the stories and keep the fans happy of the New 52. They shouldn't have cut them all off at the knees and went, hey, thanks for the paycheck, but eh.
Well, I know they had their niche with that right there, but I'm going to be honest. I jumped off at New 52 and jumped back on at Convergence because my DC come back. I mean, I'm just old school like that. I don't mind a soft reboot. I don't want the hard reboot where because it makes you feel like you've just read comics since you were 8, 9 years old. So you've read these books, these characters for 20-something years, and then they're just going to throw away everything you've read. It no longer matters. It didn't happen. We're going this route.
Oh yeah, no doubt. But if you're going to spend that much time and you've created a fan base, what's one book every quarter? They waste more paper than that on some of this yuck that we see on the stands today. I mean, we're talking 4 books a year to keep some folks happy who paid your bills for almost 3 years.
And they would have been smart to have kept a New 52 verse. Just say this is Earth. This is Earth 52. We're going to do Batman, Superman, Justice League. That cover, or even if you want to do a Green Lantern book. Well, it was kind of crazy because like Batman and Green Lantern kept most of their continuity or parts of it. So
that's the worst part to me is after Rebirth and everything else. I don't know whose continuity stuck and who's changed slightly and who's changed completely, because you read Green Lantern and okay, everything that happened before New 52 and in New 52 is still canon. Most of the stuff in Batman was, but we're going to change this for Flash and we're going to change this for Aquaman, and it's like, all right, what's the actual history now? Because I'm lost at this point. I used to have a pretty good grasp on it. I mean, I ain't no expert, but I wasn't dumb by any means either. Now I'm lost half the time, to be honest.
Don't feel bad.
But with that, we've got just a little bit more news. Movie and TV news. We've got Resident Alien returning to Sci-Fi and Peacock for season 2 on January 26th. Hassel, I know you don't watch that one, but if you get a chance, you would enjoy that show. That show is hilarious.
I have heard very good things actually from multiple people, and during football seasons, it is hard for me to watch anything other than sports. I mean,
this is at the end of football season.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, my teams that I follow are done for at this point. The Bulldogs have successfully won the national championship. We still go dogging around this palace, and so I'm finna have a little time on my hands because the Braves don't kick off I start watching around mid-April, so I'm finna have a little time to actually start watching something.
And the next one we got, you and I had a discussion last week about how CW admitted they are not profitable, but now their Arrowverse is looking at another show and pitching the idea now. Supposed to take John Diggle, who was, Green Arrow's right-hand man on Arrow, and he's going to found a team of 5 new recruits. They're all going to be young, going to school. They'll go to a certain school, a prestigious university. He oversees their training as superheroes.
Did he become Maxwell Lord at some point?
I don't know. I'm assuming there's going to be some more actual characters that we probably know from the comics in that group, but there's been no word on that. I mean, it just came out that they're looking at pitching this now, and I was kind of a little bit dismayed because I was hoping that they were going to move him into being their version of Jon Stewart, because his stepdad in the show was in the Army, and his last name was Stewart, and he never took his stepdad's last name. He kept his of Diggle, and the Flash from the '90s show, when he was on there, made the comment, "John, you're not wearing your ring," and they kept showing different things over the course of the last year since they ended Arrow, and he's popped up in every one of the shows, and they kept doing this Destiny thing for him and talking about this box that he had this glowing green item in. So I was assuming he was going to be their new Green Lantern, but it seems like they're kind of changing that direction now, making him their Professor X, I guess.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the CW had a great start, and it quickly went the way of the social justice warrior agenda. And unfortunately, us comic book fans are forgiving in a lot of things. If it makes sense to the story, we're going to ride with it. I mean, exactly. If it makes sense, because look at most of us. We got no reason to discriminate against anybody for anything. You know what I'm saying? So we're the most forgiving crowd out there. But no, they just stepped too far, and they can't reel it back in. And now they've lost a bunch of their diehard people, and it's going to be one of those things that will go down as kind of like the first couple phases of the MCU. It was a hell of a project. I mean, we gave it our all, and then look to see what's come after. And that's 12 years you're never going to get back.
Yeah, I wish a lot of these companies would realize that while the woken culture screams the loudest on social media, they're not the ones that's buying and watching your properties and keeping you going.
They actually spend the least.
Yeah. Now they're the ones that jump on there and bitch. But if everyone would just learn to tell people, hey, you have the right to your opinion, I got the right to mine, so you can just shut the fuck up because I don't care about yours, everyone will be fine.
Amen. We have pull boxes here for our Groot's VIP Society, but it's in the back. because for me, other than a few, very few independent titles like God Love Elvira and Dynamite, it's awesome. And a certain other things, it doesn't sell for me. I'm not going to have it on my sales floor. My vintage issues outsell new stuff almost 20-1.
I can believe that.
Yeah,
And
as much as I'm a fan of current artists, some current artists, I'll put it that way. That vintage art it's hard to beat, man. You look at that and just the nostalgia, it brings you back, and it's beautiful. And I will take old school John Romita over a lot of these new cats any day of the week.
Oh, amen. And then you take like Batman Family, you get 3 or 4 really good stories for less than $7. You spend $8.99 today, and you finish reading the issue, and you're like, "What the hell was that?"
Yeah.
And someone, other than I just lost a $10 bill,
what's memorable about it?
Most your average books back in the day, even up until I don't know, probably the early 2000s, were 30 pages, or 45, sometimes 45 pages. You have a big 45-page spectacular, but I mean, it was typically a minimum of 30 pages.
And like I said,
now you get what, 13, 14?
If I get a shipment of comics in, I might get 30 titles. I can read them in less than a week. I've been reading the same X Factor from the 90s X Factor run, the Epic collections they're doing. I've been sitting back there reading it all this week, and I haven't finished it yet. And I've been on it for a week and a half now. I feel like there's a whole lot more story in here than I get on the other.
Yeah, because I mean, not only they tell a better story and more per panel, so to speak, but you just it was at least two or three of today's issues was one issue when we were growing up.
Well, I know we're getting ready to get into this, but take a look at the writing and the what ifs. You had a lead story, you had 2 side stories, all in one issue, and you got the gist of all 3 stories. The art is gone.
Yeah.
You know, the writing art of being able to minimize pages and still telling a fulfilling story is gone. It's all into this big drawn out exposition. You know, Gotham by whatever, and a whole full panel of a bridge with but where's the story? Why are they there?
Exactly. Yeah, so
that's just me.
Oh no, I agree with you, and I actually want to delve into that some more in a couple minutes when we get into our focus topics. But we'll finish up the news real quick. There's not a lot left, but we did get the Moon Knight teaser last night during the NFL Super Wild Card game. That's the only thing of the NFL I actually saw this week was the Moon Knight teaser. It was actually pretty good. Looks good to me. I'm not the biggest fan of the suit so far, but again, I've only seen a couple of shots of it. But
I'm hoping it's not the final suit. I'm hoping that's because when Daredevil first dropped, all we saw was the black unique or tarred in the black mask, but we didn't see he was getting a Daredevil suit for some time. So I'm kind of hoping this is his beginning suit and not his final suit, because I'm a big Moon Knight fan. But I don't want to see him like a fucking mummy the whole time. I mean...
And I really wish we could have seen more of the Netflix Marvel side of things, because when Disney increased the licensing fees and everything for them to be able to... They didn't tell them they couldn't have the show. They didn't cancel it. They just made the fees so expensive they couldn't have the show.
And they've done a really good job with that Punisher and that Daredevil. They've done a great job. I wasn't big a fan of Jessica Jones, but that show there was good. Those other two.
But they had also had plans to eliminate Iron Fist and eliminate Luke Cage, but put them together as heroes for hire and have them traverse a full season's worth of appearances through the other shows just to cut money. And they still couldn't cut enough to pull it off. It's just sad.
Yeah, and I enjoyed those shows. I thought they were all really good. But while we're on the TV stuff, Ming-Na Wen, who plays Fennec Shan on Mandalorian, she pulled a Tom Holland on everybody over the course of the week. Sent out a tweet congratulating Katie Sackhoff on her tweet actually said, "Woohoo, thorough for you, Katie Sackhoff, congrats." And then it was pound Bo-Katan, # Star Wars at Disney Plus, which makes it sound like maybe they're going to do a Bo-Katan or another Mandalorian series, the different set of Mandalorians and all. And she had to take the tweet down within minutes of putting it up. So I'm sure Disney snipers were somewhere pointing a gun at her, telling her to take it off. But it sounds like she might have revealed a show that they weren't ready to reveal yet.
I don't know if she'll get her own show. I feel like she's either going to show back up probably on Boba's show or be an integral part, maybe the Ahsoka show.
See, I think she might get her own show, though, because I think she's an interesting character. I'm not as delved as deeply into her as some of the others, but at the same time, like Kevin was talking in comics, has gone that social justice way. Certain people at Star Wars keep trying to do that too, and she is they have pushed her a lot, that character a lot for that.
Well, she is an interesting character, but I just feel like if you have 3 Mandalorian shows, because you've got 2 now, and what carries them is 1, the Mandalorian is more of a gunslinger, and you got that old spaghetti western vibe while you watch it. Each episode seems like something. Boba Fett is the baddest bounty hunter the galaxy's ever known, and has a fan base far before they made him cool. So I just feel like if you add a third one of that, whether it's a female or not, you're just giving a little too much. I see her being a great supporting character on a show. And I would love to see her return each week. I mean, she could be every single episode. I'm fine with that, but I don't think she'll carry a show.
I don't disagree with you necessarily, but I can see where they're going to make the argument that we need to have a female lead character that's not just a Jedi like with Ahsoka. So I can see them pushing her in her own show instead of just being a supporting character.
You guys got to remember, too, you got to look back that if we refuse to learn from history, we're going to repeat it. Go back to Star Trek when they were trying to decide what to do. They had basically Starfleet Academy, 90210 in space. They had Delta Quadrant Special Ops, where they got stuck on the other side. They always go through this process to see what's going to stick on the wall, what they can get away with, and what they can afford. And sometimes none of it adds up, and it just gets pulled for, a multitude of reasons. And only the boardroom knows for sure.
Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see what comes of it. It was just kind of for Ming-Na Wen, who's a huge Star Wars fan. If you watch any of the interviews, she's always talking about how she is so thrilled and excited, even if it had to have had one bit part in Star Wars, and it morphed into this because she's a self-professed nerd. She loves comic books. She loves Star Wars and all. So she's always talking about it. And then she might have jumped the gun congratulating a little bit. So I'm sure she's just wondering, okay, so what are we actually going to tell people and what is it about? I'm curious to see what it is myself.
What's interesting too is that we can actually thank Disney for a possible resurrection of Stargate.
Dude, I hope so. I love Stargate
because they've proven that in a streaming format, you can take that and move the ball forward. Same way I'd have to say go back further and thank Cobra Kai, because Cobra Kai showed it's a textbook on how to revive a basically horrible set of movies that were disjointed back at the time. And now they've woven it in with some little, a little of this, a little of that, a little retconning, a little adjustment on attitude. And now you can go back and go, wow, I can actually see where this links together. You can't do it unless you watch Cobra Kai.
Oh, yeah. You don't realize that Ralph Macchio was not the hero of the story completely until you watch
Johnny Lawrence was the real winner. He did not. He was hit with an illegal kick.
I'm not going to say he was the winner. They both had their problems.
Y'all want to do a Cobra Kai? I'll have my son on with y'all next time. We do a whole hour or two. He even makes trading cards. He sent it to the cast. They've signed them, returned them. He sends them 2.
That's awesome.
They sign one, they keep one. I mean, Cobra Kai pretty much has changed his life. It's really inspiring to see. It's and he is definitely just to keep tension in the family. I am Miyagi-Do, because somebody's got to be. I drew the short straw, so luckily, I can be an ass no matter what gi I wear. So it's.
But did he go Eagle Fang? That's the question. Did he go Eagle Fang?
You know what? He knew Eagle Fang was happening before anybody else.
Oh, wow.
Because he managed to pick up one of the catering shirts while they were still filming. Somebody sold it, and it had the Eagle Fang logo on it from the caterers for that season. He knew before anybody. And
That's
as a
sweet.
loyal fan, he bought it so that he could keep it to himself. He didn't post on his Instagram until after it was known.
Yeah, my child is not, he likes it, but he is not as much into that as he is our last bit of news, which was some breaking news from today that he actually sent me when he was sitting at the clinic getting his COVID test. But Microsoft Microsoft has apparently bought Activision Blizzard as of today. They were still working the deal out, I think, earlier today, but it is pretty much all but finalized on the ink drying. But Activision, huge gaming company, especially their Blizzard section, where they've got Warcraft, Diablo, Overwatch, Call of Duty, Candy Crush. I mean, that's just a few of their most widely known ones. They got I didn't realize how big they were. They've got like 10,000 employees spread across numerous studios. But Microsoft bought them today for $95 per share in an all-cash transaction that came to $68.7 billion total.
And do you know what hung up the deal for all this time?
No.
Cinematics.
Really?
Because they wanted 100% of everything that was done, and there were some rights issues with cinematics. And they finally ended up getting all of the I's crossed, dots T's, paid a bunch of checks, and now they've got it all.
Well, didn't Blizzard try to, property out several or write out several of their properties for movies and whatnot? I know we got that little terrible Warcraft movie, but I think Diablo at various times had its rights sold for
so they had to go back and make sure when things were expiring, was anything in motion, so that they could get it all back. The last thing they wanted is to be a Marvel and not complete.
That makes sense. And Hassel, don't diss that Warcraft movie. That is the greatest cure for insomnia known to man. You can turn that on at 10 minutes in, you're going to be out.
Yeah, I can believe this here. I mean, I would love to see a Diablo movie, but I'm not big on the Warcraft. But I mean, I think the biggest thing going to come from this, they do. I think this is going to hurt. It won't hinder PlayStation. It will hurt PlayStation just because of the Call of Duty game itself. Now they're going to have to pay Xbox a piece of the pie to have these games on their system.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what kind of contracts they already had in place, but this purchase does make Microsoft in the top 3 gaming companies, because before they were not quite in the top 3. One of them that's in there is Tencent, and I'm not entirely sure what all they do, and then the other being Sony, and we all know who Sony is. I'm just not real familiar with Tencent, but that's not, as of now, Microsoft is number 3, and it's at least in revenue and game sales.
And I don't see them withholding the rights to Call of Duty, because that would be foolish of them, because PlayStation sells so many copies of that game. But at what price is PlayStation going to get it at?
Well, it may not even be as horrible as you think, because the only reason they made the purchase was for the IP power.
That's true. They're going to make a lot of money off that no matter what.
In this day and age where content is king, you've got to be able to have IP that's established just to pay the checks. They just
bought a ton of it.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, and I didn't realize how much. I knew Blizzard had a lot of them, but I didn't know how many. And then I got to look at them. I was like, I can't list all these. I'm just going to pick a few top ones that I know everybody's heard of.
Well, and in Blizzard's heyday, they started like 6 venture capital side spurs that were doing a lot of really cool stuff, and they bought all that too.
Yeah, because one of those is one they kept touting on a lot of. It was King or something like that, and I didn't realize that was even part of them and all that. But apparently they carry a lot of naming games. And I think it's more of a mobile platform ones, maybe.
Yeah, and like I said, they sunk a lot of money into that to try to farm out IP, because they could see where everything was going, but they got left behind. Netflix snuck up, then the next thing you know, the streaming wars broke out, and Microsoft was kind of like, So they're slowly trying to get back to where they figured they should have been, that they just got caught sleeping.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting to see what becomes of it. So, I mean, that's a potential real world what if for us. But with that, if you guys are ready, we'll go straight into the focus topic, which we won't talk about what if comics. And again, Kev, we invited you because you are the fountain of knowledge here. So I know a little bit about the origin of what if and elseworlds stuff, but probably not near as much as you. So I can share a few things I know, but you feel free to jump in and take us on a ride, because again, you're going to know far more than we do probably.
Cool. Well, I hate to bust all y'all's bubble, Let me start out with the reason why what ifs existed. It was to keep people employed. Basically, you had all of this talent. You already had people working on things, but you needed to keep them employed. You also needed to keep acknowledging your copyright by keeping these characters in print. So if you didn't have plans for them, you gave them carte blanche to say, look, go create me something really cool to read. It doesn't have to be in continuity, and earn your damn paycheck. And basically that's what they did.
Yeah, and from what I looked at, because I looked at a lot of history of both DC and Marvel before this, and I'm not a historian, but just what I was able to look up, and it looks like, and we all know DC, had that stretch of time from the 40s to the 60s, continuity wasn't even a thing, and then you get into their competition with Marvel in the 60s and start going from there, and continuity is a big thing at this point, but DC's was muddled, right? I mean, we had different Earths everywhere. They couldn't figure out what stories fit where, so they just started calling the stuff imaginary stories if it didn't fit, but they were still writing them, I'm assuming, to do exactly what you said, keep people employed and keep the copyrights active.
They already had a multiverse with Earth 1 and Earth 2 before multiverse was a thing. DC did.
Yeah, and I saw that. I didn't realize that they tried to lump their stuff under what they called imaginary stories, and I don't think they were well cataloged, and a lot of people couldn't tell you what fit into which continuity and which one didn't. Which
well, I mean, to your average fan that maybe doesn't pick up books, say they pick up an occasional book. If they go pick up one of those titles like that, they're like, at least with Marvel, you knew it says "What If." With DC, you didn't. You picked up something, you read it, you think this is the real deal, and you get to argue with a comic fan that reads every issue. You got a problem.
Well, and that's one of the reasons when they finally branded the Elseworlds logo, everybody knew when they saw that star that that's what actually caused it to have its huge impact when people realized, okay, we're stepping outside of continuity, and I want to read a Batman story, but I don't like the Batman that is on the shelf right now. Okay, here you go.
And so let me ask this, Kev.
Yeah.
From what I saw, it looked like Marvel started their What If series in '77, and DC didn't brand Elseworlds until like '89.
Roughly like late '88. They did like 2 years of horrible, good stuff, but no way to really brand it.
Did they take a cue from Marvel and branding it that way to try and get the readers to buy into it more? I mean, and I know you said why they produced the stories, right, to keep the copyrights and everything, but did they do that branding just to try and set it apart and say, okay, we're going to clean some of this up some? Because that's what the purpose of Crisis was, but even after Crisis, there was still some, at least for me as a reader, and I was young back then, I was still very, very tiny, so I was still a little confused all throughout the late '80s on what fit and what didn't.
You got to remember that they were all about DC. All back then was about keeping it compartmentalized and streamlined. So you had your Elseworlds, and then when you had what I guess you'd consider Black Label stuff now was like your Vertigo. And then so they wanted you to be able to stay in your lane and enjoy what you enjoyed and move along. And with the Elseworlds, they'd already had a multiverse, like we talked about when you look at the earlier stuff from the 60s. There was already multiverse stuff being cooked in. Like what happens when you have Superman in the Phantom Zone, life in the Phantom Zone. Was it not, this, that, life on Krypton. But the coolest part about it was when they actually got their crap straight, you could go to places that you yourself had always wondered about. But what was different between the What If usually had 3 stories, 1 main and 2 backups. Elseworlds were usually a 1 or 2-parter because they told a lot more story with the Elseworlds than just half a book. So you really got to flush out a world. Think of it, Earth X and the CW. You got that level inside every Elseworlds, which was really cool.
Yeah, and the What If always, the Elseworlds to me was a little bit different too, because they start out with here's a completely different take on the story, whereas What If said, okay, everything's the same up to this point, and at this point, it diverged.
Yeah, it was typically like a crossroads, so to speak, and how many of those stories wind up becoming like, and some of the, especially some of the ones wrote in the late 70s, early 80s, wind up being actual continuity versus stories later, like Smart Hulk or the Invaders coming back
Jane Foster is Thor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, there were several things that they wound up doing in the late 70s, early 80s as a what if that wound up weaving its way into continuity later because it's like, hey, this is a pretty fucking good idea.
Yeah, what if Conan made it to modern day? I mean, a bunch of stuff that, and the scary part is, I don't know if that was a general progression or if it was just straight up crap laziness. Let's see what Wallace did. Oh, okay, we could do that. Yeah, that was awesome. You don't know. We're not behind the boardroom doors, but ideas come from everywhere.
I always thought they were great books, especially, I mean, whether it was Elseworlds or what if, but it was one of those things of, okay, you got somebody who's telling a story, so let's just grab Chris Claremont, for instance. He's always over here telling the X-Men stories, but maybe he wants to tell this one Spider-Man story, but it doesn't fit in the continuity of now. So he can still go right and call it a what if.
Well, and then you got to understand too, there was that strange, we haven't covered it yet, but there's a strange point in time when Marvel and DC worked together.
Yeah.
To create Amalgam.
I've got a few of the big books, like they call them magazines, but like the Hulk and the Batman and the Superman one with the Spider-Man on the cover. Those are really cool books.
Well, yeah, but no, they actually did a brand with the Amalgam title where you had Bruce Wayne with Wolverine.
Yeah, just after the Versus books.
Yeah, they called them Dark Claw. But yeah, they actually worked together to produce some really cool what we'd call mashups today. And some of them, they even got more than one issue.
Yeah, because I think they went back and did a whole second run, or I say a second run. They did I think they did what was it, 12 or 24 issues, and then they went back and did another 12 or something a couple of years later.
But yeah, they were cool, and that's when they actually worked together. And then you had when Stan Lee, oh my Lord, you'd have thought the world stopped when he decided that he took DC's money and, DC's world according to Stan Lee and rewrote everybody's origin.
And you know what? I actually have a lot of those, if not all of them. And those were great. It was just one of those things where as much as I enjoyed those, it was harder to read them because unfortunately, and I hate to say this because I loved a lot of stuff he did, but they just felt dated, right? That they're like, okay, we're going to tell an origin story the way Stan would have. And
Stan Lee's the Marvel way is very, very 70s. I mean, yeah, and you can go back and read a lot of the old Spider-Man titles that he was still writing in the 70s. Well, his attempt to be hip here and there is like, oh, this is bad. It's bad, Stan.
Just in today's world, right? That's what to me it didn't hold up. But I think they were still great stories. I actually have several of them. I have the Green Lantern, Flash, Superman.
Read The Death of Gwen Stacy. If that don't tear you up by the end of it, you've got no soul. I mean, it's still a great story, but the dialogue, I guess, is what I'm looking at, is very dated.
Well, now also, I don't know if you guys have ever discussed it amongst yourselves. I think Hassel, you and I have. We've had a lot of discussions here at the Zone about the fundamental differences between Marvel and DC. The fundamental differences is that DC was more mature during World War II. What that meant was they were writing superhero books with sidekicks. Now, why did they do that? Why is Robin dressed in red and yellow and bright green and flashy and Batman was not? It was so that youngster who was reading that book could have a father figure that was going to protect him, and he knew where he was in the story because his dad wasn't coming home.
So it gave him somebody to relate to.
It gave him that figure that he could bond with, and they went with it. Now, when you go a little bit further, what else is in that time period was all about aliens. So when you stop and take a look, that's why DC has sidekicks and a ton more aliens than Marvel did. When Stan came up and decided that he was going to make it the Marvel way, it was about empowering teenagers. It was the 60s. It was nuclear power in discrimination. So you have mutants and you have the teenager who's empowered. That's where Peter comes out. That's where the X-Men. But you notice that those characters still don't have parents. So Stan took the sidekick and moved him up to a team and said, look, rather than you relying on someone else, you're going to rely on each other, and made your teenage teams. And that's the two fundamental differences. Was
And Marvel was the first one to make the superhero have actual problems that didn't just resolve with a joke and a laugh at the end of the issue, kind of like DC did. Where Marvel, it seemed like you had relatable problems that your average teen or young adult or whatever could relate to. It's like, holy shit, I got rent due too. Poor Spider-Man can't afford his web fluid because he's had to scramble around for tuition books or something.
And take a look at the 60s and the 70s in America at the time. That's what it was about, was problems.
Yeah, that's one of the things. And I don't know if you guys have seen it. There's a documentary series on Roku, and I'm trying to remember the name of it now. It escapes my mind at the moment. But it's supposed to be about the rivalry between Marvel and DC, and you get to watch it and you realize all of them on there talking. And they show you, when you watch the trailer like I did, they're like, oh, this was a very serious rivalry. I'm like, I don't remember it being that way. And then you watch the series, they're like, there was a rivalry between executives on both sides, but everybody else was like, we were all friends. Half of us that worked at Marvel lived with the other half that worked at DC because we were sharing rooms because we couldn't afford stuff. And it's like, we weren't fighting. We were going to parties together and dressing up as each other's character.
and it was more, and the rivalry was more about corporate culture.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of the stuff that I think would have been interesting, and we might get into it in a little bit, but you talk about some of the what ifs and things, and if you watch some of that documentary, and this is where I noticed that the corporate culture gets in there, and it's like the whole reason they killed Superman when they killed Superman is because they were going to write the story of Superman and Lois getting married. They said, no, you can't do that because we farmed them out to the Lois and Clark TV show, and that's going on, and we don't want them engaged or just dating or just getting to know each other there and married in the comic books, so it'll confuse people. So they said, well, let's just kill him then.
Well, and then also you got to remember that if you see the documentary about that whole thing, when that book came out, there was absolutely nothing else around the world that was happening in news that day. Nothing. So it took the entire world by storm because they had nothing else to report on.
That was big news. That was big news at the time.
Was. And then that's when they knew they were in a spot because it wasn't supposed to last that long. And they were like, oh, my God, we got all this worldwide attention. We've got to drag it out and come up with a plan B, C, and D, because what have we done?
Yeah, and I remember the name of the show now. It was Slugfest. It's on Roku. But you talk about that when they got into Spider-Man, they said, well, we need to do something for Spider-Man because Superman and Spider-Man were the two they talked about a lot as far as struggling for who's going to be the more popular top seller, because that's your kind of your iconic character for each one. And they're like, Superman's killing us since he died and came back, and we're not doing anything since X-Men #1 came out. So what are we going to do? They said, well, let's do the Spider-Man clone saga. And then they were like, okay, this is going to be like a 3-month thing. And then every month they were like, no, you can't end it because it's selling too well. Keep writing the story. They just kept dragging it on and on. That's where they went back,
because they just, there was too many spinoffs. It started getting really muddled along the way because it started out very promising. And they could have still ended it very promising, personally to me. But next thing you know, you've just got 75 issues of various spinoffs and one shots here, there, or the other. Plus, I mean, you got to figure Spider-Man during the time he had 3 titles a month, and one of those titles was bi-weekly. So typically, you have 4 Spider-Man books a month, and that's a lot of damn issues on top of the fact that you got one shots here, or there, and the other, and it just got very overwhelming for a fan.
And when a company has to do the clone files and bring you up to date on what you may have missed, there's a problem. The storyline has been played out.
Yeah, and that was one of the things they were talking about in that documentary. Like, we can't keep up with what was going on from week to week or who was writing what part, and it became a whole mess. But with that, one of the other things we wanted to talk about while we were talking some of these what ifs are, what are some of the more popular or pronounced? Go ahead, Kevin.
We can't go any further unless you mention the Star Wars Infinities.
Oh, see, I forgot about that.
Yeah, see, the Star Wars Infinities is what's led up to what DC is doing right now with Tales from the Dark Multiverse. So Star Wars Infinities took that place where everybody who's watched the first trilogy, the Holy Trilogy, the original trilogy, and
Not
went,
just the
wow,
trilogy of walking.
yeah, and what would have happened if this would have been different that way? Well, they actually wrote it. And then some of the fans wrote even cooler stuff. The Infinities is like to up hundreds of storylines right now with Star Wars. They've done the prequels, the new trilogy, the original trilogy. But yeah, that's where you took that one moment in time, and instead of stage right, you go stage left. And one of the covers, which was awesome, was Leia in the throne room with Han Solo in a gold lame bikini with a chain around his neck, and her feet's on a Wookiee floor carpet. And she becomes the hand of the right hand of the Emperor, and then kills him and takes her rightful place as Empress. But I just had to throw that in there because
those are great, because I actually like those. You mentioned that it brought about the dark multiverse stuff for DC, and I won't claim that I actually enjoyed those. I read those, the main title of that, but it was just so far left field for me on those. I couldn't get into those too much. But now the Star Wars Infinities I actually really enjoyed.
And that was a way. And then when going to the Tales from the Dark Multiverse, that was a way for them to kind of take the stuff that was prominent and give it an Elseworlds vibe to see if Elseworlds was worth reviving today. That was their test market for a new generation of Elseworlds.
And it's kind of interesting to say that, because, you look back at What If as well. I mean, there was like 13 volumes of What If, and some of them were full volumes of, multiple issues up to hundreds or whatever, or how far they went. I think the first one was like in the 50s or 60s, but then you get to the current What If stuff, and they just take basically your Avengers versus X-Men, for instance. That was your summer crossover. So then they do 5 issues of, what would happen if this happened in Avengers versus X-Men? It's like, it's not the full What If that I expect anymore.
Exactly.
And same thing with Elseworlds. I'm not getting a bunch of stuff that's different in there anymore either, if they're even still
in all
doing it.
fairness, with the original What Ifs that we during the late '80s to the mid '90s, that I remember them. Monster, our area here, we didn't have comic shops anywhere near. Like, you had to drive at least 30 minutes to a comic store. So when we were younger, you either drove 30 minutes to a comic store, or you went to your local grocery store or a convenience store who just happened to have the newsstand there that, sold various magazines, and they would have like just buttloads of comic books that you would thumb through and be at the mercy of what they had.
But you couldn't get it from issue to issue. And the only store you could get it in was Winn-Dixie, to be honest. They were the only ones that had the newsstand in Fitzgerald at that time.
Piggly Wiggly also had a good variety, actually.
Then also, depending on who their magazine provider was, they were biased towards either Marvel or DC in the area that they were in, because they were very territorial. When you bought magazines, you could only get really the DC side or the Marvel side. Very few of them had two, unless it was a guy who owned 2 shops across town. He'd get one magazine from one distributor, one magazine from the other distributor. So he'd have Marvel and DC have to split the shipments between the 2 stores.
And the convenience store that was within striking distance of my home that I used to walk to as a young child and they were primarily Marvel. You might see Batman or Superman on a shelf just because, but I just remember the covers is what always captivated me. Like, you could go through and thumb, and the What If covers always look so great. Now, you might look in the inside, and the interior art match nothing like the cover art. But they can sell you that on that $1.25 issue.
Yeah.
With, that cover art alone. And you like, this is pretty cool. To where I was definitely going to get my Spider-Man each week when I went in there. I would occasionally just grab various ones, it was, just whatever looked cool.
And then occasionally you would think about the cover, and the tagline alone was enough to go, hey, I thought about that. I wonder what their take on it was. That was the real cheese was, you look over your shoulder. How do they know what I was thinking?
Give the fans wheels rolling on their heads.
Yeah, and But before we go any further, I got to go back and address something Hassel said. He said when we were younger, we used to have to drive 30 minutes to get to the comic book store. That ain't changed for you, dude.
It has not.
There's still nothing in Fisher. You still got to drive to Tifton to see Kev.
Poor Kev, he tried to help us out and enlighten our nefarious town here, but they had to pay the crime syndicate to grow this overgrown, the world's largest chicken statue we have. So we lost out on a true treasure.
Yeah, it was sad, but we had a hell of a good run when we were Stargrave. That's for sure.
Yeah,
you know what's really cool? Now that you mention it, we have 3 generations of customers who shop with us just from Fitzgerald, because everybody would come up to deal with Mama Kim. Now that child has had a child of their own, and I dealt with their dad. So I've dealt with now here the grandson, the son, and the granddad, same family. 3 generations shop with us still. It's really cool.
That's awesome. That's really awesome.
See, that's the amazing thing when you can get into an area, and I don't want to say just a small area, but any kind of area where you can continue to grow like that. Now, unfortunately, Fitzgerald has its issues with, and I won't get into many of them because I don't know a bunch of them, but when businesses were there was a lot of times it was hard to keep a business going in that area.
Yeah, it was tough. Luckily we had lined up with the right, with Mr. Mason. He was an OG. And when they tried to put pressure on us, he's like, no, he's under our protection. He's under our blanket policy. So even though it was tough, it wasn't as tough as it could have been, because I still remember the day when it was fire inspection. Chief come in, this, that. I said, well, you're not doing anything until I call my landlord. Oh, really? Who's that? I'm like, you'll see. So I called up Gene. I said, yeah, Gene, the fire marshal's here. It's like, okay, well, his phone rang and I went, bro, that's for you. And he had to know. He says, okay, they passed. Let's go, guys. We're done. That's it. That was the inspection.
Yeah.
Gene calling them and it was over. I was like, okay, maybe we'll stick around for a little while longer.
Yeah, so I mean, you have to deal with things like that. Unfortunately, in some of the smaller towns, and it's hard to get your foot in the door if you're not, as you put it, if you're not the original people there. They're like, we don't know you. Let's get the pitchforks and torches out here.
The chicken town definitely fears outsiders.
But when you can make it work in a smaller town or area like that, you get that just like you were talking about, Kevin. You get that 3 or 4 generations coming in there, and you're like, man, this is great because you become a part of the culture, right?
Oh yeah, it's awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. So we are running a little bit closer on time, but I did want to delve in, and maybe we won't spend as much time on this as because I think we're probably going to come back and do some more of this later when Kevin has another chance to join us again. But if he's willing to, that is, if we haven't run him off by the end of it.
Hey, I'm just honored that y'all invited me to come in to hear what this poor old country boy's opinion may or may not be.
Hey, you're enlightening us on a great deal of this right here. So I mean, we're more than happy to have you.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask both of you guys a question. What are some of your more memorable and popular stories from the What If or the Elseworlds and stuff? What's some of the ones that stick in your head or that you really enjoyed? Or
I'll let you go first, Hass.
For me, on the Marvel side of things, I really liked when they did the Exiles title, because that was like a monthly What If in it, but it had an ongoing continuity. I'm huge into continuity. I love feeling like what I read matters. Like, it's just not a throwaway story. I'm not somebody that wants the throwaway story, but Exile's really done it for me because it was so fresh each month, and you got so many different cool takes on established characters and various different natures and whatnot. But I guess as far as like just a one-off, the one where Wolverine got killed by Hulk. That one was so cool to me when growing up. And on the DC side of things, it's hands down Kingdom Come. That is such a great trade and a different take on things. And Alex Ross always knocks it out of the park when you just visualize his art. I mean, it's great.
Yeah.
I got 2 that come to mind. One of them is, I can tell you the cover. I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's got basically the equivalent of Batman flying in the sky with his Green Lantern symbol on his chest. And basically,
I actually
you
have
find-
that one. I know Emerald
Yeah.
Knight or something like that is the name
yeah,
of it, I believe.
basically you find out that Bruce Wayne gets the ring and he becomes Avenging Angel, and that's where you get that mesh up. That was because of the Wayne Industries is in charge. There's been two versions. One is that Wayne Industries, he's actually the test pilot because his dad gets killed in the alley still, but he's the test pilot for Wayne Industries. It happens, and instead of the story as it goes with Green Lantern, you have Bruce Wayne given the ring, which was seriously cool. The other one I can't remember the name of either, but it deals with Alfred. Do you realize that Alfred has been with the Wayne family for generations?
No.
Yes. He had the great grandfather in the Wayne family, he owned a war debt too. So when he died, he told the Wayne hierarchy that we are going to look over your family line, and you come to find out that Alfred has been dipping in the Lazarus pit.
No, really.
So that he
That's
can keep every generation of Waynes, he creates a Batman.
Sweet.
I
Yeah,
have not read that one.
it's
I haven't
seriously
either.
good. I got goosebumps just thinking about it because it's off the chain. And it was back in that time where Ra's al Ghul was a thing, the Lazarus pit was a thing, but it wasn't marked as an elseworlds. That's in that murky period, Monster, we were talking about that.
Yeah.
Okay. But it was awesome.
I will say it's probably one of the dumbest decisions they've done in the last 15 fucking years is kill off Alfred.
Yeah,
I mean, I understand what they were doing when they were trying to put some true consequence and sorrow in Bruce's life, but that's one you don't really come back from where it doesn't. When you do come back from that, and they will, at some point, they will bring Alfred back. There's no way around it. It's going to come off as cheesy and muddled and terrible.
Okay, now you guys picture this, and we're going to do a test, okay? Picture Alfred in your mind's eye, okay? Now, he dabbed just long enough in the Lazarus pit to age 1 to 10. Think about how long he's been with the Wayne family line.
Good Lord.
Yeah,
Looked like he was 100.
Quite a while.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
That's and it flashes like when you get in the story, it's these beautiful art pieces of the Civil War where he's with the Waynes, and it goes back to the Revolutionary War where he's with the Wayne, and it goes to it just. I mean, again, the goosebumps. I just can't. That's one of my favorites because it's so cool.
That does sound interesting. I'd like to see that one. I gotta find that and look it up. Yeah, I've read a few. The ones that really stuck out to me for DC was the one you were talking about, Kevin, with Batman as Green Lantern, and Kingdom Come as well. But yeah, Kingdom Come was kind of a thing unto itself for the most part. But that one where Batman becomes Green Lantern, and I actually have two of them. One, and I think there's a second volume where like Sinestro is basically like his version of Joker, and those were really neat to me. And then for Marvel, that there was a mini series inside of What If, and like I think it's in like volume 3, and it's the Timequake storyline, and it's very much, if you watch Loki, they stole a lot of stuff from that storyline. It's the Timekeepers trying to get rid of Nexus points, and you have they revisit several of the What If storylines, like what if Spider-Man had joined the Fantastic Four, what if Wolverine was Lord of the Vampires, and the Timekeepers have to employ agents because they won't directly interfere, just like the Watcher, and the Watcher is watching them indirectly interfere by putting their agents in place to get rid of the Nexus points that someone else is protecting, and they're trying to. This is the only one that I can remember. So they're saying, okay, if this doesn't bear out to the way it's supposed to, it directly affects the 616 universe, which is your main Marvel universe, right? Yep. And that's the only one I remember like that, and that's the only one that I really like. I loved a lot of those, but that's the one that sticks out in my head the most. And actually, I still have the issues of those somewhere around in my apartment somewhere.
Now, my Marvel that sticks in my mind is for a totally different reason. I was a big fantasy, I'm an RPGer. I'm D&D from back in the day. I've been, almost 45 years in RPG. And That's the one where Conan gets, because of a spell, gets moved forward in time to our current day. He scares the total hell out of this dude in the alleyway. And you see hundreds of bills fly as the guy drops his money. There's his wallet, and the money just goes off. He bends down, picks up like $1.75 and change, and goes, "Feels like home." It just and
awesome.
then, you know, he becomes a thug for the mafia. He becomes an enforcer. He's got like this leopard. He's got women on him. And he doesn't know that what he's doing isn't right because he's just fit in as an enforcer. And then it goes.
Doesn't he battle Punisher in this title?
I don't remember. That first part is the part that just, you know, the $1.75, the coins feel like home. And
for some reason, I want to say I remember what you're talking about, Nam. The conclusion is him coming to head with Punisher at some point, but I could be wrong on that right there.
And I think there's a museum where he busts in to get a Captain America shield at one point in time. And it was really cool.
That is an interesting one. I don't remember that one. Go ahead.
I think you guys will appreciate the other one too that we all kind of forgot and brushed over as far as DC goes. I'm sure you guys remember the Justice League, The Nail.
Oh, I have that one. Yep.
I mean, that's an epitome of an Elseworlds right there.
That's a great one. Now, I will say I have both the Nail and the Nail 2. The Nail 2 doesn't hold up quite as good as the first one. That first one is amazing, though. So I wanted to ask you guys one more question before we move into the nerd out section as well, which is us asking questions anyway. But is there any storyline or title that you would have seen just rather be a what if than a main continuity storyline that you thought kind of muddled things up too much?
Civil War.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because they made Tony Stark the villain. There was no way around that, Tony Stark being the villain, and he was the villain for quite some time. And I don't feel like he's really truly redeemed himself within the 616 from that again. So there wasn't a lot of coming back for that.
And I'm not a big new comic book reader, but I wish that they would have done Miles Morales as a what if and actually come up with a different way for the next generation of Spider Person to be done rather than the way they did it.
That's a fair point.
I loved him in the Ultimate Universe. I just think he should have stayed in the Ultimate Universe.
That's what I'm saying. It's the way that it happened.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's a really interesting character. He's not a Peter Parker.
No.
That's some huge shoes to fill. And if the writing's not there, it's just weak.
When Bendis wrote the title, he respected it and he tried to treat them as separate entities. And it was his story, not, and he was just honoring Peter's memory. But as soon as Bendis left the title, it went south, and now it's like this. It's just woken. I mean, there's no nice way to put it. It's just woken.
To me, my son and I were actually having the same debate about the Miles character because he was playing the video game the other day on the PS5, and I was like, okay. He's like, yeah, the Miles was shorter and this and that. I was like, the more I think about it, I enjoyed Miles in the Ultimate Universe where he was his own character and he was trying to come into his own as Spider-Man to honor Peter. But as soon as you stick him in the main 616 and they're both called Spider-Man, this is not the Flash legacy where Kid Flash grew up to be Flash and he's still there with the other one and they're saying we're both adults now, we can both share the name. Why is he Spider-Man and he's like 10 years younger than Peter Parker?
Especially now that he's in a
name and own character.
He's in this little wonky looking tracksuit. I want Ben Reilly just to slap the shit out of him and say, look here, buddy, I'm a clone and I'm more Spider-Man than you. Get the hell out of here.
And then for DC, I would like to see an Elseworld with Static Shock that was different than the way Static Shock was an awesome character that they kind of tokened out, which really makes me sad.
And the problem is they've tried to go back and revisit that Milestone universe in the last half of this last year and even into now, and it's not the same as it was before. But at the same time, you want these characters to be more popular for Milestone to come back to what it was. But it's taking you 4 months to put out the difference between issue 4 and issue 5, and you're being published under DC's banner. How can you not get the issues out there if you're trying to rebuild yourself and say
Exactly.
this universe mattered, and now you're taking 4 months to make 2 issues.
Yeah, something like that. Like with Image, when they done the Image United, they should have had 6 issues in the can before it ever got marketed, before it ever got put to shelf to print or anything like that. You give me a damn script for 6 to 12 issues, and or give me the script for 12 issues and the art for 6. We'll catch up before it ever hit shelves or marketing or anything.
I have a complete run of the original Milestone comics, and back in my day, I didn't see it as black heroes. They were heroes.
Yeah.
They were just superheroes.
As a superhero story. It didn't matter what color they were. I could relate to everything that was going on. Ohio kid, not a lot of money, trying to do this. Then you look at Hardware. It was all about, you could identify with the bits and the pieces that hit home to everybody.
Yes.
And that's
this is the thing that this is the exact discussion Monster and I have had countless times. I'm all for diversity. I create 1,000 black heroes. I love it. Blue Marvel is one of my favorite characters. They've come up with it in the last 15 to 20 years.
Yeah.
I really love the character. He's great. He has purpose. Give them purpose. If you want to make homosexual characters, I'm fine with that. Make a new one. Give him an interesting backstory. Don't just make him flamboyantly gay just for being flamboyantly gay. And do not take a character that is 100 years old in continuity and all of a sudden say, you know what? Man, I sure love some man sex now.
I'm with you 100%. Let's not go the lazy route either. Let's deal with North Star, the very first Marvel openly gay character.
And they do nothing with him.
Flush him out. I mean,
they did nothing with him.
Exactly. And don't tell me that Marvel doesn't have women characters, because you've got a bunch that haven't even been flushed out. Tigra, where's she been doing? What's she been having going on for the last?
She's a mainstream Avenger for years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, and the Wasp. I mean, they dust her off every time an Ant-Man movie comes out. So she's due.
And why go to Black Panther for your black character? There's Black Goliath. There's Black Lightning. There's all of these other characters, both Marvel and DC, not just because of what they are, but give them the iconic nature so that they can stand up for their community, which can still be enjoyed by everybody.
Luke Cage, Brian Bendis done so amazing with Luke Cage right here. I mean, he done exactly what you said. He made you see past the skin color, which is what we're supposed to be doing, and you see the hero inside, and that's all that mattered.
Exactly.
It's storytelling. It is doing it the way it should be done.
And nobody's mentioning the fact that we allowed, as a bunch of fans, we allowed Captain Marvel to get blonde-haired and whitewashed out for what should have been the next in succession after the male Captain.
Yeah.
In her Afro beauties from the 70s. I mean, in her white outfit and the black star. No one has a problem with that. We can whitewash that character. That's fine. But we want to. No.
Well, I think they're trying to rectify that a little bit with what they did in WandaVerse, by adding Photon in there. But she was supposed to be Captain Marvel.
Exactly.
But with that, we'll move along just because we're in a little tight on time to our Nerd Out section, which is, and we've been kind of doing that already anyway, but this is where we ask each other questions and do answers to it without any preparation for each other with what we're going to ask and what we're going to go into. And, as we go through these, for the viewers, if you feel free to provide your answer below to any of our questions, or if you want to expand on one that we asked, then feel free to do that in the comment section as well. But Kevin, since you're our guest this week, I will defer to you if you want to go first, or if you want one of us to ask a question first.
I'm going to sit back and see how this works. Let me just kind of hang back and let me get a feel for it. Cause I got a feeling a little back of my hair standing up. Like I'm walking in that dark room and I'm not quite sure if I want to turn the light on or not. He's
being John Madden. He's like, he wanting to see what play we throw before he knows if he wants to blitz or not.
Hey, there you go.
Well, you're getting questions from us, so they're not going to be life threatening by any means.
Hey, to a nerd, all this stuff's important.
It is. Hassel, I think you went first last week, if I remember correctly. So I will throw one out, and I'll let you answer first, and that'll give Kevin some time to prepare. So if you had a choice, and this is going to be a kind of a weird question, but what real world, what if for the entertainment industry would you have been curious to see unfold differently? So something that happened, real world, what's one that you would have liked to seen unfold in a different way? And what do you think it would have, what kind of effect would it have had?
Oh, I got your hands down right now, baby. All day. What if Vince McMahon had honored Bret Hart's contract, let Shawn Michaels go to the WCW because he wanted to go play ball with his friends? How different would the landscape of professional wrestling be today had that happened? Because not only Shawn Michaels would have still fizzled out in WCW, just like he did with the WWF. He was gone. He was gone 6 months later after that anyways. For what, 5 years, 4 years, somewhere like that.
4 or 5, yeah.
Bret Hart would have never had his concussion, and we would have got matches. You'd have got another year or two out of him and Steve Austin off and on, but then you'd have had him entering into that Attitude Era with The Rock, with a emerging Triple H and DX Steel, Kurt Angle entering into things. I mean, The Undertaker moving into his badass, Kane. So there's so much you could have gotten. What if? And then not only that, you would have got him staying behind the scenes because he wouldn't have been betrayed by Vince. So then he becomes the Pat Patterson, like where now, God rest him, Pat Patterson's gone. You would have a great finish man that would be loyal to Vince.
That's a very interesting one.
It is.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, so I also too wonder if Shawn would have recovered any quicker, because what really drug him out of that 4 years and all was the Kevin Nash setting him up with the Nitro girl that became his wife. I can't remember her name now, but would he have met her sooner and moved forward?
Yeah, exactly. What's to say he didn't go to WCW? They had realized, hey, Hogan's not the only show in town. We got him here. He can carry the ball as a champion. He met her, might have cleared up some of his demons a little earlier than he did. And maybe he'd have never had to go away for 4 years. Maybe we would still have these WCW today.
Fair.
So, Kev, you want to answer, or you want me to go ahead and answer to give you more time?
No, I got this one, brother. With all of the controversy going around with Star Wars and how well the streaming's doing and how their last 3, whatever we want to call them, I guess technically they were movies, I guess. I mean, they had characters and somebody made a script and they filmed it. So I would have loved to have seen Disney suck it up, take all of the notes that George Lucas did and do the last 3 movies the way George had started laying it out.
Oh, I'd like to have seen that.
Yeah, I would have loved to have seen it, to see, because there was 3 partial outlines done when the sale was done. He gave them what he had in mind for 7, 8, and 9.
Yeah, he gave them the roadmap to where they should go.
And they wiped their ass with it and threw it away.
Yeah.
I'm not even saying bringing them on board, but using that, I would have loved to have seen would that have re-sparked Harrison Ford to not want to have his character killed off? Would that have reunited some of the other cast earlier than what they had? Would we have actually had Leah for maybe 2 or 3 movies if they wouldn't have spent so much time trying to figure out how not to pay loyalty or pay legacy actors and concepts, and just did it? But that's mine, for what it's worth.
That's actually very interesting right there, because of the fact that, for one, everybody's still hoping they decide to do this at some point. But
amen.
I mean, they totally shit on the legacy of character. I mean, and I'm not saying follow what George had to a T, because let's face it, there's some things that he done in the prequels that you could tell he done from a marketing standpoint alone. Jar Jar Binks is the modern day Ewok.
But you got to remember, though, when he wrote his outline for 7, 8, and 9, it was after he did 6. So it was before the prequels that all this was laid down.
Oh, yes, I understand. Well, let's face it, we got Ewoks in 6 just because of toy rights. But I mean,
well, in the same way with Jar Jar Binks, and he would
yeah.
have
So I mean,
there.
but the main story and the road map, so to speak, I think would have been very, very great.
Yeah, because this last one we were given was just a disjointed mess.
Yeah.
Hell, you know what? You wouldn't even have. I'll go one better than that. You wouldn't even have to include Lucas at all. Let's give the first team the ability to finish movies 8 and 9. Let's see where it would have went.
And not try to just fix what the 9
Exactly.
with and resurrect or salvage what
Exactly.
they could, anyways.
For me, when I was putting together this question, the thing that popped in my head is how would the landscape of not just comics, but also currently the movie and cinema right now, how would that have changed if the X-Men had gotten canceled before Claremont and Cockrum and Len Wein actually took over? Because, for what, 30, 40 issues, it was a complete reprint of the original run from Lee and Kirby, and that book was on the chopping block many times, and now it's the X-Men number one selling comic of all time, and X-Men cartoon brought you in Spider-Man cartoon in the 90s. It brought in the X-Men movies in the 90s. We started off, yes, we had Blade and some others, but would you have even gotten them if you hadn't had that X-Men popularity driving that train for Marvel at the time?
Well, not even necessarily X-Men popularity, but the Marvel money from all the animated stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of that seeded a lot of other things that caused the ball to keep rolling, even when Marvel was going through financial times. They kicked enough stuff down the road where they could pick it back up.
Yeah, see,
look, towards what, the late 80s to most of the 90s, I mean, one of the most popular anti-heroes Marvel had was Wolverine. Without the X-Men, you wouldn't have had Wolverine.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. If you hadn't had Claremont and Cockrum and Len Wein take over when they did, would you have actually gotten and started a new X-Men franchise there? Would you have actually gotten, could Spider-Man have carried Marvel on his own? Because let's be honest, as good as some of the other stuff was, Avengers wasn't selling what Spider-Man and X-Men was selling. Fantastic Four was up and down, but nowhere near those numbers from what I understand. But I just wonder if they
let me go ahead and rectify this before someone corrects me, because I know it's coming. Somebody's going to get my ass on social media. I do know Wolverine started an Incredible Hulk. I'm not saying that. I was just saying he would not have had the longevity without.
He was intended to be a throwaway character in the Hulk.
Yes,
if I'm not
and
mistaken,
that's what would have happened had he not joined the X-Men and that stayed on.
But I honestly think, though, too, that Wolverine takes that place of, he's kind of like Star Wars Boba Fett. When we knew less about him, he was more loved.
Oh, yeah.
And as they've tried to flush him out, he's lost some of his luster.
He was far more interesting to me when he didn't have his memory.
Okay, now my question for you guys before I lose it.
Yes, sir.
After what we just discussed, for the DC universe, if you could polish someone else to be the anti-hero, like your Boba Fett or your Wolverine, how would you rework it, and who would it be?
Monster, you get to go first.
I'm going to have to go with
Did I pick a good one for my first time, guys?
Yeah,
you did.
This is
you
hard.
did, actually.
I would probably have to go with I'm torn between two people. I don't know, and one of them is not a true DC character because he was picked up when they picked up Wildstorm. But you got the character of Grifter, who is trying to be that anti-hero, but at the same time they haven't developed him enough to really be
Shot
that.
block right there.
But my other choice probably would be the most obvious, would be for me at least, is probably Deathstroke, and try to, instead of turning him into a full-on mercenary, have him be a mercenary starting out as who only takes contracts on people that you would consider, criminals or evildoers or whatever, and basically make him into a cross between what he is now and a Punisher.
Okay. Hassel just kind of sat back a little bit more in his chair, and he's stroking his beard, so I have to see.
Grifter was the first thing that come to my mind, too. That son of a bitch stole it, so...
I beat you to it.
Ooh, you did. Wow, that's a really, really great question, because, I mean, it's hard to have one that comes to mind that, isn't already in the anti-hero role, like a Jason Todd or a Black Adam or, someone of this nature. Ooh.
Now I'm glad I went first. You won't say
You know
that next time, will you?
There's a way to do it with Martian Manhunter, I think. Like he has
That's
become so jaded with the way humanity has worked, where he's tried to see the good, he's tried to see beyond, what's in the man's heart, but he keeps seeing what's in the man's heart. So there is a way to do that, and you could do 12 issues where he goes down a really dark path where he's just skating the line of being a hero, but then he finds his own redemption through someone he didn't see salvageable towards the end.
Yeah, I was thinking Raja Ghul.
That one was another one that was like, but
because he's
to
been
me,
so
Raj
many
isn't really
different
a
ways.
villain. He's one of those that just is. He's like Doctor Doom. They're not really villains, especially to themselves. But
I've always thought that Raja Ghul was more like a Lex Luthor.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where he sees his vision as being the right vision, and you're either on board or, much like politics today, either get on board or get the hell out of the way.
Yeah, with Lexus, it's not that he wants to be the bad guy. It's just Superman's just always in the way of what he wants to do.
Exactly.
Well, Lexus is more ego to me than anything, because Lex is like, I can still do this whether Superman's in the way or not, but why am I going to give him any glory? I'm going to take it all for myself.
That was a damn good one, Kevin. This is why we had you on board today for your fountain of knowledge. So I feel like my questions gonna come up a little short here.
Like other things.
Well, hey, that's what she said. But all right, I'm giving you a what if on 6 issues here. What character, and you can take it from the DC universe to Marvel or the Marvel universe to DC, however you want to. A Stargate, so to speak, opens up, and this one character is displaced into the other universe. And I'm not talking about like an universe, the actual 616 for Marvel and Earth Prime or whatever it is for DC. What character do you take out of their universe, put over to the other one, and how do you let it play out?
Kev, if you want to go, or I can go either one.
I would have to say, considering everything that we've seen and that we know, I think the one thing that DC is missing is the heart of Doctor Strange. So I would have to move him from the Marvel to the DC, only because Dr. Fate, Dr. Fate, Gold Mask, Dr. Fate is very possessed and cold because he mimics the spirit of the mask. Where I think that the magic in the DC universe really has no soul. And I think that bringing him over would cause a lot of the mystical elements in DC to be better and accentuated and highlighted. And I think it could be really cool. And it'd be nice to see someone give Superman a bop on the nose and go, I can kill you, right?
Be pretty sweet.
I mean,
Yeah. I had the same, not necessarily the same character, but the same kind of thought on the mystical realm of it, because yes, DC has a lot of mystical characters, but they're all kind of off doing their own little thing, and they're very disjointed. I would pick a mystical character, but I would also, bring him over from Marvel, but I think he would fit not just from a mystical way, but also that kind of gray area that Marvel gets into, their realistic side of it is, where's the moral ambiguity at that DC really doesn't. DC is, you're either here or you're here. There's not a lot of in between, on at least the way they write nowadays. But I would like to see Ghost Rider in the DC universe and see how he would, with him out there punishing someone who's done something wrong and he's getting vengeance. What's his version of vengeance versus Batman's version of vengeance? What's his version versus Superman's not going to put up with vengeance, right? But how, he's a mystical character, so he can hold his own. So that'd be an interesting.
Yeah, Superman's not just going to put his hands on Ghost Rider and that's the end of it. Or Batman, either one. Well, which version of Ghost Rider, Monster?
I'm a Dan Ketch fan. I like Johnny Blaze, but I like Danny Ketch better.
That's what I'm talking
just because
about.
I read more of him, right?
Well, Danny wasn't the crybaby that Johnny was. Johnny was always just a cry ass to me, and where Danny was like, that's what I got,
But now, in fairness, Danny got a Ghost Rider that at least talked to him and tried to work with him at times, and Johnny Blaze got a demon who was bonded to his Ghost Rider.
Well,
right? So he didn't get a full on.
One guy's Arthos and one guy a family
friend.
Yeah, one got Zarthos and one got a family member. So,
Yeah.
apples and oranges, though.
That was very cool, gentlemen. I like that.
Hassel,
Well,
you
for
got
mine, I think I'm gonna stick with the same motif we're all pulling here, and pulling Marvel to the DC sandbox, which is saying that we really all feel that DC is lacking something. But I'm gonna go because Monster really stole a great one there. He's caught blocked me twice tonight. Yeah, I'll let my wife come home later and see if you can finish for the coup de grace. But I'm gonna go with the heart and soul of Marvel Comics. To me, I'm pulling Peter Benjamin Parker out of the Marvel universe, putting him into the DC sandbox. You could have such great interactions with him, Batman, Green Lantern, and I would love to see him go against. I think him against that Batman rogue gallery will be some really great storytelling. Because
I'd like to see him against Owlman.
that would be pretty sweet too. That would be really sweet too. Because I mean, Peter's such a genius. He doesn't really get the respect he deserves as far as his intellect, because he's foreshadowed by Tony Stark and by Reed Richards and even Blue Marvel. I mean, these are guys that all are just super geniuses. Doctor Doom. You don't have a ton of super geniuses in the DC universe. I mean, I know they got them, but for the most part, I mean, I think he would probably be a little tech wise, a lot smarter than a Bruce Wayne or a lot of what they have over there. Maybe not a Lex Luthor, but it would be interesting.
I'd like to see one issue of him and Wally West having a conversation and fighting the Flash's rogue gallery, because that would have to be hilarious.
Them two doing quips back and forth. I would sell that book big time. Big time.
All right, now I've known you guys for quite a while. I'll throw one more out there since we kind of went this way. If you were going to go the same route, portal opens up, somebody gets put one to the other, would you go Star Trek to Star Wars or Star Wars to Star Trek, and who?
If you want a big slaughter, you pull Vader into Star Trek and he just murders everybody and takes over a galactic empire over there really fast.
There you go.
You know what I'd actually like to see from that is someone like Picard, or someone who is very explorative, which is what most of Star Trek is about, right? Versus the wars, which is a fighting, and put him over here and him have to understand that this is not the same space you're from. This is a true war. See how he reacts to it.
Yeah, instead of a territorial dispute.
Yeah,
I would like to see a Super Picard and an X-wing. That'd be pretty cool.
See if he can do his Picard maneuver in it.
Or as our good buddy Casey would say, Pickard. I'm hoping he listens to this and gives me shit later.
What about you, Kev? Who would you like to see go between those?
Honestly, I would love to see Quark go over to Star Wars and give the Hutts a run for their money.
That's a
that's an interesting take. That's a very interesting take.
I mean, you gotta, I mean, that would make me smile.
Just when you think you've got all the answers, Kevin changes the rules.
Oh yeah. Well, with that, I think that brings us to a close today. But we definitely want to thank Kevin for you coming and joining us. And as always, you guys are our sponsor, and we love you guys to death, and we appreciate everything you do for us. And for all the fans out there, remember, check out Zone Collectibles in Tifton. You can find them if you need them on email, zonecollectibles@gmail.com, and you are on Facebook at The Zone Collectibles. Correct? I didn't mess that up, I don't think.
That is the Zone Collectibles, and you can't miss our swirl. So,
and remember, also bringing unity through community. I'm gonna get it out twice in this episode before I mess it up. So
2 more episodes. He's gonna have this down, Kev.
I struggle. And that's just to explain this a little bit to you guys. We've got an artist corner. I don't charge them anything. We've got local artists who can get away where they can meet folks in here in a safe environment and get their art out there. Our shirts, for which I'm wearing one. I don't know if you guys can see it.
Yes.
This is our Nerd Up decal. But what it was we had a concept. We had more custom designs, work it out. We had our local artist, Foxfoot Crafts, work with it. The shirts were manufactured here in town. If you buy one of our shirts, you help support us. You help support the local artists, but 100% of the proceeds goes to the soup kitchen or peanut butter and Jesus. And when you walk in with one of our shirts, it acts as a 10% discount, whatever you want for the day.
That's
So
awesome.
that's where we're really pushing unity and community and fandoms uniting, because there's more, as we've just discussed, there's more that we have in common than we don't.
Yeah, and
That's our big push.
and we appreciate everything you do for us here at the show, and thank you for letting us be a part of that community as well with you guys. And yeah, I think with that, Hassel, before I forget, because I was about to fly right through and forget, how about you tell everybody where they can find us on social media as well?
You can find us on Instagram at the Nerdy Manroom Show, and you can find us on Twitter at Nerdy MR Show.
And with that, I think that's it for
Excellent.
us.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you again, Kevin. And remember, if anybody enjoyed any of this video or any of our other content, give us a like, subscribe, share, comment. It always helps us out. And we'll see you back here next time when we're going to see what's more than meets the eye. And until then, live nerdy and enjoy the possibilities.